Hi, everybody. So it looks like we have 3 viewers. If y'all want to join, you can unmute yourselves. I'd love to see your faces. And we can start with some introductions when everybody's ready. And I'll try to keep up with the chat in the YouTube channel. So if anyone has any questions that they would like to ask, you can always put it right there in the YouTube chat. All right, so Jillian, can you hear me? Can't hear Jillian. Oh no. Uh-oh. All right, let's see. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm still figuring out how to use this. See if that works. I see 4 viewers, but I don't hear anyone.
No.
I see Melinda. There it is. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm still figuring out how this works. Can you hear me, Melinda?
Yes.
Great, and I can hear you. Perfect. All right, I guess we just have to wait for a couple other people to join, and then we can get started. Is that all right? We'll give them like 2
Yeah, they're on the other channel.
Okay.
There's several people there.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. There's Jenna. Hi, Jenna.
Hi.
Hi. And Jillian says she's joining. And Allison. Hi, Allison. Jenna. Hi, Jenna.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Allison, is that?
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool. I can hear you too. All right. Let's see. Jillian's supposed to be on in just a few minutes. Let's see. And I do apologize. My kids are awake and interactive, so I might be interrupted every once in a while.
Should I have the Google Hangouts open or the YouTube?
So the Google Hangouts is what you should have for us to talk, and then it's broadcasting on YouTube Live if you want to watch it. But I have the YouTube Live up. I just muted it because it's got a little bit of a delay, and I need to see the chat in case somebody else wants to join.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Uh-huh. And if you have your own like questions that you want to ask, like you guys can go ahead first, or I have some questions that I've like pre-written that we could discuss. And I'd love to do introductions too when we're all ready to go. All right, so Jillian's having a little bit of technical difficulties get her end. So if we want to get started with introductions, that would be great, you guys. We'll start. My name is Tiny Daki, and I am from Philadelphia. I work at the University of Pennsylvania in Philly, and I'm an entomologist studying the butterflies and moths and their parasitoids of Costa Rica with Dr. Daniel Jansen. I'm also a co-founder of the Philly Pod of 500 Women Scientists, and I'm on the leadership board. I help to organize all the pods that are all over the world. So go ahead. Somebody goes next. I choose Melinda.
Hi, I'm Melinda Wharton. I'm in Atlanta, and I work at the Centers for Disease Control. I'm an infectious disease epidemiologist.
Very cool, Melinda. That's awesome. Jenna, why don't you go next?
Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm the founder of Sister, known as @SisterSTEM on Twitter. We're a media platform trying to amplify the voices of women in STEM. I'm here in DC right now, and I read the book a while ago, so I remember everything. I do love it very much, so I'm excited for the discussion.
Cool. Thank you, Jenna. And Allison, go ahead.
I'm Allison Markline. I'm a postdoc at Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and I study climate change in agriculture.
Cool. Awesome. Right. Well, let's get into it. I think Jillian, poor thing, she's having some issues with her internet. Jillian's one of my Philly Pod members. So Rawan, it helped to really like get this started, and she's written most of these questions. So if you feel like the question needs to be different or asked a different way, I also love book clubs, how you ask one question, but there's always these different kinds of answers. So some scientists are insistent on distinguishing female and male brains. Why do we need a biological argument to fight for women's advancement? I don't know, what do you guys think? I don't think we need a biological argument to advance us. I don't think that's a fair thing to have to do, but for whatever reason, it seems to be the norm. Like, how would we undo that? I don't know.
I think it's just really hard to tease apart what's like socially conditioned for women versus what is a biological difference. And there are some people who think that women are just biologically like not as smart or not as good at math and are just better in general at like woman things versus like males being better at engineering. And because I think both of those, it's like a spectrum of personality traits and there's so much overlap between the two, it's just really hard to tell if the like differences that we see are because of encouragement growing up and trying to do what society expects of you versus like a brain, like a difference in our anatomy.
Yeah, totally. Jenna, did you have a thought?
Well, I think sometimes it's easier to just like blame biology kind of, or just frame it as like a difference in brains than maybe taking responsibility as like a society or a culture. So I think I can see why it's a convenient thing to do. But yeah, obviously it's not the perfect or the only way to look at it. So yeah, I think it's something that we tend to do for convenience to kind of just support our own opinions about what the roles of women should be.
Melinda, did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess there's, even if there are on average some detectable differences in certain things between men and women, there's so much variation and there's so much overlap that at an individual level, it really doesn't have anything to do with these population level observations. So I don't even know that it's I don't even know why people are, I think the thing that was striking about the book was how determined certain investigators were to find differences that don't really seem to be very meaningful, again, not at an individual level, when there's so much overlap among populations in terms of all of these different domains. So it really did suggest to me that people were approaching this research to prove something that maybe didn't really have anything to do with the science behind it.
I really agree with that and found it really disturbing that several of the researchers wouldn't even read, I forget her name, but it was missing a vowel. Hardy, maybe? There was a scientist who did a lot of research on the lack of differences between male and female biology, and several of the scientists, even the one who, like, even one male who answered a ton of the author of this book's questions, said like, oh yeah, I haven't read it. Oh, that goddamn paper. And then he was like, yeah, I'll look at it for you. And then it's like 3 weeks later, he's like, yeah, I still didn't read that dumb paper. Like, she's a good scientist, so I tend to believe her, but I'm just going to ignore it because I'm an angry person. And it's so dangerous to have pet hypotheses.
Yeah, I totally agree. That was very frustrating too, that he basically told her that he would read it and then he never followed up on it. And there's Jillian. Yay, Jillian.
It finally worked. Sorry.
It finally worked. So go ahead. Why don't you introduce yourself, Jillian?
Oh, I'm Jillian. I'm out in the Philadelphia suburbs. I'm one of the Philly pod leaders. And I like reading books too.
Cool. So I'm going to go to the next question. So in chapter 1, well, actually, we were just talking about research and bad research. So I'm going to go with how do they get away with doing all this bad research? Is the peer review process not good enough? Are we being, like, is the peer review more focused on certain types of people? Like, submitting papers myself and hearing how the process was done, I was kind of surprised that sometimes when you submit a paper for peer review, you just pick your friends, which I thought was a little unfair. It says ethics are currently emphasized in curricula, especially in graduate school, but what will it take to really cleanse that arena? And I feel like you have to be okay and uncomfortable with maybe not getting your paper published or having some really bad reviews. I don't know. Have any of you submitted a paper?
No, I've only been a co-author on the paper, and I did very little work.
I've submitted papers and I've also reviewed papers, and there was one where one of my co-authors was a co-author on this paper, and I sent in a letter to the editor being like, I work with this person, so I'm not sure if I can do do an unbiased review. And they said, like, thanks, we still think you can review the paper, but we'll like take it into account. But I feel like that was going above and beyond on my part of like trying to be fair. And I wonder, it seems like other people don't do that. And the journal was still just like, yeah, we need reviewers, so like do it anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think they have a very limited pool of people who are actually willing and able to do reviews. And so maybe, you know, they're not as strict with who they choose to be the reviewer, but I don't know how that would change.
Well, and it seems like if the reviewer has an opposing view that is very different, you know, maybe, I mean, in a way that could be a good review because that's going to be the toughest review you're going to get. But at the same time, maybe a lot of works won't get published because the reviewer is in a stronger position point.
Yeah.
To prevent new research being published.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think the onus is really on the journals to have an editorial process that's based on integrity rather than cronyism. And probably different journals do it different ways. There is a lot of bad science, though, that gets published in these sort of third and fourth tier journals. There's so many now that I think anything can get published somewhere. And at least from what I see, there's a lot of things get published that shouldn't.
Okay.
Oh, there's also some journals now that are open for online comments. I know there's like a biogeochemistry journal where there's like anybody can comment online, and maybe it's biogeochemistry discussions, but that's like one other, like a different, like one journal is trying to do it differently.
Interesting. Okay. Thanks. In chapter
one more.
Yeah, go ahead, Jenna. Go.
On that, I don't have an academic background, so I'm not as familiar with the process of publishing, but I thought one of my questions when I was reading was, I mean, first of all, how this biased research gets published, but also the guy who did the, I'm trying to look him up, the one who did the test with the babies and the faces versus the like more the mobiles or whatever the other thing.
Brother.
What was his name?
It's the guy, the actor. It's his brother, Borat.
Oh, okay. Is the one that was talked about a lot in the book. I did not realize that connection.
Baron Cohen, I think, is the last name.
Yes, exactly. Okay. I thought it was like amazing also how that became such a highly cited study. And so I guess I have, I wonder how, not even just how the research gets published, but then how it becomes so, so widely cited and just kind of held up as this truth. And then of course, beyond that, it filters into our societal perceptions and like what the public knows about these topics. So yeah, those are just questions that I still have based on based on what I found out and from the book.
Yeah, I think think as a human species, we like to put things in categories. As an entomologist, I love putting things into categories. And I think that we like to have a simple answer. You know, we don't want to have to ask difficult or complicated questions. And so when someone presents us with a very simple, easy answer, regardless of whether or not it's correct, we like to hang on to it because it makes us feel better. It answers that question. I think that's one of the reasons why he got away with that for so long. I muted myself. Any more comments or thoughts about the Baron Cohen paper? Because that also made me a little annoyed. But
well, I mean, I haven't read the original paper, just the description of it in the book. But it seemed like even the differences that were found were really trivial. And to base this whole theory about, you know, differences in substantial differences in the brain based on sex, it just seemed ridiculous.
Well, and I also wonder if, you know, doing a study in these kind of social kind of studies, like it's a lot harder, I would imagine. I'm a chemist and not a social scientist, but I would think it would be a lot harder to have controls of like positive controls and negative controls and things like that. Because in this study, I mean, you have babies, you have children, you know, you can't even really talk to them because they are so young at that point. You know, and then there was all the bias of like, well, what if the woman smiled at him or at the kid, or what if the woman didn't smile at them? Like, I don't know. It seemed like a poorly controlled study, but I'm not sure what I would do differently to make a better control set.
yeah, and as a mom, like just having a baby in front of you and not reacting to it is so hard. You know, like I think it's just part of who we are, that you see a baby and you have to interact with it in some way. And I think being completely neutral in that situation is an impossible task. I don't know how people would do it. So, okay. The next question she has is from chapter 1, page 28. She says, with good research and reliable data, the strong can become weak and the weak strong. With all the supported counter-arguments to women inferiority, have we reached a point where our stance can be considered strong, or what will it take?
Is there a way to like post that so I could read it and digest that?
Yes. I'll put it here in the Google chat.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I know. Book club questions are always like, there's always like 3 questions in one, and they're like big sandwiches of questions.
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like we still have to really try hard to say that we're strong.
I think it goes back to being a good scientist, right? And like getting rid of your preconceived notions and just look at the data. But then what is good data and what is skewed data is hard to know, I guess.
Yeah, for me, I just, like, I don't even think this is possible, but thinking that if these scientists think so strongly that there's a brain difference, then like, what's the harm in trying to encourage women to do like more math and science and be powerful, and teaching men to be more compassionate and empathetic? Like, what's, if you think so strongly that there's brain differences, then why not try to test that hypothesis further by just promoting more equality when children are growing up? as an entire society to like, let's just completely change all of our norms.
Well, I liked the parts in the book where it was talking about different societies where they didn't treat women differently, or women actually had what we consider as more masculine roles. So, I mean, I thought that was a really great comparison of saying, like, you know, we've been taught this for so long that it's really hard for us to think of it as being different.
All right, I was just taking notes. So, oh no, Melinda left. Okay. So I'll pick the question, speaking of other cultures and how they view women. So she talks about the 7-month pregnant Kung woman who's going through the Kalahari like an athlete. She has her 3-year-old child on her shoulders. She's got a digging stick in one hand, and she's got food that she's gathered in her other hand to take back home. And such a vivid image depicting women as superheroes. And why are women pressured into taking all these super strengths, or do they inherently own these superpowers? I don't know. I've been part of a lot of different mom groups, and I will say that I think we also, I don't think it's so much society, but I also think that there's an internal like pressure from other moms. There's no other mom that will be more critical of a mom than, you know, the women in a mom's group. And so I don't want to attribute all of this societal pressure on, you know, society as a whole. But I think some cultures, when you get a group of women together, we can become hypercritical of each other. And it's almost like a competition to see who can be like the strongest mom, or who can do the most, or, you know, who can make your own baby food, or sew your own bibs, or all these other types of things that I was not able to do because I was trying to write my graduate degree final paper. So I did breastfeed, which was really, really hard. But doing all those other things, I felt a lot of pressure, not only from myself, but from the other women, that I had to do better and do more and like be that superhero woman. Are any of you moms? No. Do you ever get discouraged from becoming a mother, knowing that there's all these obstacles in your way?
Sure. I mean, I don't know if they're necessarily obstacles, but like I look at my coworkers who are fathers, but you know, all of their wives stay at home with their multiple children. And while they're saying like, yeah, you should have that, but at the same time, it's like, but like, how am I supposed to do all of these things?
Yeah.
And then I've also been, you know, I've also talked with other women scientists who've raised their children and are at that point of their lives, and they're like, yeah, you know, I was back in the lab a week after doing research, and it's like, well, how? I don't understand. But you're right. It's something that like I feel like if I do this, I will be expected to also be back in lab next week, and
Yeah.
you know, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think too, for if you're in a partner relationship too, like you as partners have to decide how you're going to balance your careers and your family. My husband is the breadwinner by a very, very high margin. He works like 80 hours a week. He doesn't get the time with the kids that I get. You know, like I'm sacrificing a little bit of my career to help raise the children. He's sacrificing almost all of his family to provide for us. You know, so I think regardless of what choice you make, if you make a choice to focus on your career, you will have to sacrifice some time with your children. There's no way that you can be a super mom and that you can do it all without like inherently destroying yourself. That's just my opinion and my experience. But
well, and as someone who hasn't had children yet, but is in the process of considering it, it's like people talk about work-life balance, and I'm not sure it's necessarily a balance. I feel like it's more of a pendulum. There will be times where you need to focus on one thing more than other things, which is okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, doing it all at once seems unrealistic. And I feel like it's something we need to kind of stop saying, like, yes, you can do it all. And it's like, yes, you can do it all, but not all at the same time.
Very well said. I agree. Jenna or Allison, do you guys ever think about having children, and is it something that you would like to do?
I definitely do not want them, and that is something I have felt forever, pretty much. I love my sister's son, and like I really like other kids, but like I just got back from spending 3 days with my sister's 2-year-old, and I'm sitting on the floor playing with him. I'm like, oh my God, like this is my favorite child in the world, and I'm like, do not want to play with a truck anymore. So it's just like not a thing that I want to do at all. But there's a lot of other things that like I have really important friendships and other hobbies and activities that are outside and like outside of work that I guess it's not, I'm not taking care of another living being. So it's not necessarily like as critical, but I still have things that are important to me.
Yeah, same here. I'm married and I'm still like, I'm pretty much have decided with my husband that we don't want kids. Maybe we'll think about it like in like 10 years or something, but we're pretty sure we don't want kids, which is like kind of actually a controversial thing to say. I know it disappoints a lot of people, but I don't know. I'm kind of on the same page as Allison, and I just can't even imagine it right now. But I think I have so much respect for the people that I know who are mothers. So yeah, I think it's everybody's own choice. But for me, I wasn't like, I didn't really connect with the mother angle that much of this chapter of the book, but I thought like the athleticism was really incredible. Because I know like as just being like an athlete in high school and stuff, you're always slower than the boys. Like, I don't know, you always feel like you'll never get to be on that level. And it was cool to hear about like the extreme feats of athleticism that hunter-gatherer women or, women of like a different time also like apparently were able to achieve. That was really empowering to me. So yeah, that was a takeaway.
Great. And thank you too, guys, for like standing up and saying like, I don't want to have kids. I think if more women said it, it would be more socially acceptable to say, I don't want children. And I think that we need to be more accepting and supportive of women who don't want to have children. I'm in another book club that's, more a social book club, and there's 6 of us, and 2 of the women don't have kids. And one woman really wanted to have kids, but she was physically unable to. And then the other woman is very, very outspoken. She says, I don't want kids. I don't want it. And I think that's great. I think that you should do what you want, what works for your life.
And I think people who have had children and have had that great experience need to think about not saying things like, oh, you'll want them later, or just wait. And it's like, no, this person has made this idea. Stop putting your ideas on them.
Or you would be such a good mom.
Right. I mean, yeah, keep it to yourself.
I agree 100%. I think, and then Meg Duffy also had a great article, maybe it was Meg Duffy, about what you shouldn't say to a pregnant woman either. Like, there's just some things that we assume that are ingrained in our society of what we can say to women and what we can't say to women. Like, take a minute and stopping and thinking, would probably be in our best interest. And Melinda just told me her kids showed up, so she had to get off the chat. And my kids are under, my husband's actually watching them to make sure that they stay quiet. But every now and then you might hear my son downstairs on the Xbox. He's playing Fortnite. So, kids are great. And I agree with Jillian. Like, I don't think everybody can be a good mom. I don't think everyone wants to be a good mom. And, again, that's okay. So. Let's see what our next.
I have kind of a side comment.
Sure, go ahead.
Related to the like other cultures and how strong women were. And I found it really fascinating that in these communities where females were cooperating and working together, whether it's helping to raise the kids or gathering the food, they were like the strong leaders. And it wasn't until people switched over to farming and the men were able to be in groups together that they were able to dominate women. And like thinking about the evolution of patriarchy was like such like a new idea for me. So that was really enlightening. And like, I want to learn a lot more about the history of the patriarchy and the transitions from hunter-gatherer to farming, and also the ideas that women are just so sexual that men need to control them is like, I'm still kind of wrapping my head around all of that.
But I loved all the anecdotes from the other cultures where women were like, yeah, where they were like, yeah, you can have multiple partners, it's fine. Like,
I love that. You go whatever height you want in the middle of the night.
exactly. How did that not spread? I don't understand.
I actually went into the Amazon jungle on like an ecotourism trip with my family, and we stayed with a culture that was largely detached by like an 1.5-hour plane ride to a city in Ecuador. And like they just like had sex in hammocks, like in a big tent with like children around, other people around. And it was definitely like a lot of like, I mean, I didn't see it happen, but that's what the culture was. And then it's like these women were very important. Anyway, I saw it with my eyes, so.
Cool.
Not relevant, sorry. Or like not, never mind.
No, I think it's good to think about how other women interact in society in other cultures. Yeah, I always find that interesting. I don't know if I could have sex in front of my kids. Like, that's definitely not something that I have up there on, oh, let me try this today. There's a reason why there's a lock on my door.
Or even like in front of a dog. It's weird.
I know how many people call into Dan Savage's podcast saying, how do we do it in front of the dog? He cries all night.
Oh.
Yeah. But I do love that other question too about the cooperative breeding. And let me see if I can find the thread I had about it. And it might be.
It's on page 105.
105
is part of it.
Yeah, so I put a comment on the Goodreads about how I feel very strongly that I shouldn't be the only person raising my child. Like having a village and having everyone participate in, like, you know, teaching my children what they need to know, I'm all for, because it takes a lot of pressure and stress off of me. You know, I loved when they got to go to daycare because they got to, someone else taught them manners and how to clean up. You know, they also interacted with other children. My mother helps me. My mother lives with me, and I could not work and have the semi-career that I have, like, without her help. Like, hands down, I need a village to make this work. So I'm very much on board with the cooperative breeding. Okay, so
I think we see something similar happening now with like 500 women scientists, and at least in my social circles, female, like me and other women, are really cooperative and pick each other up. And I haven't really experienced the like catty women fighting thing in like a really long time, which that gave me a lot of hope for like when women work together, that's when they maintain their power.
Yeah, I have to say, like Jillian, I really like working with Jillian, and then we have another co-leader, and I like that we are understanding that we all have busy lives and we're all doing what we can. You know, like if someone can't get something done, well, you know, you can't get something done. It's not the end of the world. We're still going to work together, and we're going to do the best we can. You know, I don't know, Jillian, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say the group of 500 women scientists in general, like we all do seem really understanding about our lives and how some of us might have other obligations. And, you know, but in the same place in my professional life, I've definitely worked with those women who are in the mindset of I have suffered and therefore you will suffer too. Which, you know, I feel like as the next generation, we really need to get rid of that, because I don't understand why anyone else would want to suffer. And whether it's through suffering through having children, suffering through being the only woman in your department, or, you know, so forth. We need to help each other the best that we can. But I also think it's really important that we need to make men aware. However, it is hard to do that without making them uncomfortable. But, you know, they need to realize that I guess the word privilege could be used, but which also makes them very uncomfortable. But, you know, we all have privileges in our lives. They may have had more due to their career or not due to their career. So I think this is an issue that we all need to talk about, but beyond women scientists, men scientists, not even scientists, maybe people who were detoured from not being a scientist.
Yeah. And especially if you're in academia, the culture around the support network of women is also very different. Like having us women in the department who are kind to me, I don't really have that. I've had to look really, really hard for a mentor. And then when I finally found her, it took her a while to warm up to me. And yeah, but she's great now. She's amazing. And once she finally realized that I just wanted her help, I just wanted to talk to her, I just wanted to say, hey, what can we do for each other? Then she was, oh, you know, because she was literally the only female in an all male workplace. You know, she was like I think she was the first woman who was the supervisor in that, department. And it was very difficult for her. She had to push really, really hard to be perceived as someone who is capable of leading. And so she always has her barriers up. I don't know, maybe that's why women aren't kind to each other in certain areas, is because we feel like we always have to have our barriers up and be stronger than, you know, we are perceived to be. I don't know.
Maybe.
And there's also, like, if there are fewer women leaders, then there's more need for them to be mentors and more need for them to be on the diversity committees and stuff. So it might have taken her a little while to see that you're worth tutoring or like worth mentoring.
Maybe. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, I think in general in my field, it's difficult to get, I mean, the entomologists who are younger than me are very cooperative. They're different. This generation below, regardless of gender, are very open and inclusive and, you know, willing to work together. It's the older tier people who I find are so ingrained in this type of culture where it's the old white guys club. So unfortunately, that's true for most disciplines except for maybe ecology. All right, let's see. So we have about 15 minutes left. Trying to think. I have a lot of questions and I want to pick a good one, but I don't want it to be too much. So we just had an election. So how does science impact policymaking? And is research driven by science policy, or is policy driven by scientific research? And I'll put that in the chat.
Thank you.
It's a big question. Yeah, so I think the basic point is that when we go into science, we kind of want to avoid politics, but I think the two are I think this past political climate has shown us that we really do need to be more involved in policy, and we need to speak up more about what we're doing and why it's for everyone and not just for us. And it may be an uncomfortable place because I think most scientists are very introverted people. We don't like talking out in public, at least for me and a lot of the people I've met. So I don't know. I had to really push myself these past 2 years to like actively engage with my legislators and participate and get out the vote things. That was tough for me.
Well, and I think it goes back to educating. You know, people say like, well, this is published research, but they don't feel like it's proven, which I mean is a legitimate concern, as we've seen in this book. Just because it's published does not mean everything is completely accurate. But I think it goes back to we need to teach critical thinking skills possibly a little bit better among everybody.
Yes.
Does anyone feel that so when I think of climate science and ecological sciences, the scientists that I think of are generally probably pretty left-leaning. Do we think that maybe there's a way to get the partisanship out of it? Because it's really hard to take your own personal beliefs and your own politics out of something that has become so partisan.
Yeah, it's hard too because I think that the people who are making it partisan are the parties. You know, they're pushing these narratives and they're making it more and more difficult for us to relate to them. And the onus is on us to make what we're doing relatable and digestible to other people. They're not coming across the bridge at all towards us. We have to constantly, walk across to them and create these arguments and discussions and, educational types of situations where we have to, we're doing a lot of that effort. Is that supposed to be our job? I don't know. Maybe, probably a little bit, right?
Do you think the argument could be made that our own biases are also influencing our own research, though?
Oh, that's good. So, like, if I already believe that like, climate change is real and that we should do something about it, I'm going to keep researching how climate change is destroying the world like that, you mean?
Right, yeah.
So I'm only going to talk about the things that climate change changes. I
mean, that was kind of a common theme of this book, is that a lot of the men that did these research studies already had these ideas and therefore only set out on one path.
I know, but when I see a cloud forest receding over 3 decades, that's climate change.
Yeah.
Like I'm not actively saying that it's anything else. I can't not see it.
Right.
I don't know.
But like I think of the men in this book, they've been told for generations that, women are for making babies and staying home and cleaning. And they've, it's been a few hundred years that they've been told that.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe that's like a question of right now we see that women and men have different positions in society on average. What's driving those differences? And hypothesis 1 is that it's in the biology, and hypothesis 2 is that it's the culture. And so a lot of men are being biased towards hypothesis 1, biology. And with climate change, it's like we see the climate is changing. Is it because of well, anyway, there's like more specific things within our very detailed questions of like why, like how much will trees grow? And some of it's like how much light does it have? how many nutrients does it have? Like, what's going to limit their growth? And those are like different questions that you can ask with less of a bias within of like a question that is, we see this happening. Why is it happening?
So maybe I think as scientists, we need to make extra sure at this point that our research isn't biased just from our own preconceived notions. Therefore, the outcome of the research is that much more believable to everyone, no matter what side you're on.
But also, I think the people who are anti-climate change, they're also coming from a point of view where they're never going to change their minds. And we can create an unbiased as we argument, but, you know, I mean, it's like saying, see this right here? This is a rectangle, almost, right? You know, and no matter how many times you show them the angles or the length of the sides, they're not going to listen to you.
Yep.
Yeah, so.
One thing my therapist asked me is like, what would be enough if I'm like, oh man, I'm not going to be prepared for this like book club meeting. And it's like, okay, well, what would be enough? Well, if I read the whole book and take notes and write questions or whatever, like then that would be enough for me to feel prepared. And I wonder if there's a way to ask right-leaning politicians like, okay, what are things related to the climate that are important to you and your constituents, and what would be enough? Like, what would prove it to you that this is an important thing to focus on? And then assuming that they will look at data and evidence and facts. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's the hard part, is assuming that when you present them with data and facts, that they believe that it's data and facts.
Right.
But asking like, what is, seeing what they would need first. And then it would get away from the question of we're biased towards climate change. Let's study it. It's asking other people who aren't biased, they're biased away from climate change. Like, okay, like what information would you need? Just like asking us, well, what brain differences would you need to see in order to like
say that
no.
men and women are inherently different?
Yeah.
Right. That's a good question. I don't know. All right, so we have like 7 minutes left, and so I'm just going to say, I'll do one more question. So how can the arguments in this book, backed by our understanding of them, be directed to drive science equality? And how do we move from here? So if we had to think about, like what you just said, what is it going to take for us to say that, you know, men and women have different brains, or men and women don't have different brains? Like, what's your big takeaway from the book? What do you think, how can this help us to create a more equitable scientific culture?
I think we need to use these facts to figure out how can we market ourselves differently in your lab, you know, in your institution. Like, you know what skills you are good at, and whether it is because you're a woman or because you're just super organized, you know, those are two different things. But I think it's capitalizing on things that you are good at and not necessarily trying to relate them to gender.
Allison or Jenna?
My biggest takeaway, I think, well, there's one quote that I thought summed it up really well, one excerpt from the book. And it basically just reinforces this question. It says, "You may think these struggles have nothing to do with the lofty world of science. Academics often balk at the thought of mixing their work with politics. But when it comes to women, there's no avoiding it. Without taking into account how deeply unfair science has been to women in the past, and in some quarters still is, it's impossible to be fairer in the future." And this is important for all of us, because what science tells us about women profoundly shapes how society thinks about the sexes. And so I read that pretty quickly because it was long, but I think that what we can do to use this information for STEM equality is to take responsibility for, like, just affirm that excerpt saying that science does influence people. Science is political for sure. And kind of see, I think the next generation is doing a great job at this, seeing how we can be STEM advocates, whatever that means to us, if that means making STEM itself more inclusive or influencing policy with our scientific research, and just overall examining bias in every setting, like having bias consciousness training and just having that be part of our everyday narrative. Yeah, those are some broad things that I think would be good next steps.
Alex, do you have any final thoughts?
That quote, I think, is really powerful and shows the importance of this. And even, like, I listened to a Hidden Brain episode that just popped up. It was a replay from 2017 on gender differences in the brain. And the host, I, like, expected there to be, like, it started with the biological differences in the brain, and then I expected the culture side, and it didn't go there. So that's, like, one direction that I, like, am wondering if I should send a message about it, or if we as a group should send a message. But I think he needs to read this book and, like, get a more, there's just been a lot of things in here where I felt like science has cheated us. And, like, I learned so many new things that were just totally new revelations. So I think it's an important book.
Yeah, I agree. I do learn a lot too. It was nice to see all the different points of view. And those two professors who are married, who are actually pushing for gender differences in the brain, they're on where I work. And I was thinking about, like, stopping by and trying to have a conversation with them to see if, you know, maybe we could talk about it, or, you know, Jillian, we could invite them to our movie screening about the brain.
That would be a great idea.
Yeah, right? Anyway, so thank you guys for, like, chatting with me today. I really appreciate your thoughts and your input, and I'm so glad that, you know, this book helped make an impact in your lives, and that it's, you know, helped to educate us about how women are perceived in science. I think it's great. And for next 3 months books, our voting has shown that Lab Girl is the pick. So, yay! I've really wanted to read Lab Girl for a long time. I'm excited. All right. Any other thoughts before we sign off?
I wanted to say that I don't have the exact links, but I know that there are 2 fundraisers going on to get Inferior to a bunch of schools in Canada and a bunch of schools in New York City. And you all probably heard about that because they're done by 500 women scientist members. But another good next step for getting lots more people to read the book.
Yes, I'll make sure I post the links on our thing. Thank you for the reminder. The one in New York is by Mariam and Jess Wade, and they're on the leadership board for 500 Women Scientists. And we did see the one for Canada. So I'll post those links there. If you guys want to share them too on your social media, that would be great. All right. Cool. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.